Welcome to Health Matters on Channels Television. Thanks for joining us. I am Mary Alale Yusuf. By Friday, February 25th, more than 433 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 were recorded globally, with a death toll of over 5.9 million. In Nigeria, there were more than 254,000 confirmed cases. A large number of recoveries shut the number of discharged people up beyond 248,000, while deaths remained at 3,142. 15.7% of adults in the country have had one COVID-19 vaccine, and 7.2% are fully vaccinated. Remember when your mom used to give you that periodic worm expeller? It seems the practice is fading away. In a 2017 publication, the World Health Organization estimated that 873 million children lived at risk of worm infestation, prompting the body to publish guidelines for a large-scale deworming program. The plan was to treat at least 75% of children in at-risk populations. My guest is a family physician and Vice President of Medical Initiative for Africa. He joins from our Abuja studio. You're welcome to the show, Dr. Ebuta.
Thank you for having me. You're welcome, Nigerians.
Now, Dr. Ebuta, let's start with how does a person become infested with worms?
Well, thank you for the question. It would help to educate Nigerians significantly. First and foremost, where are worms? Worms are mainly in the intestines of mammals. Human beings are several billions, about 7 billion plus, 7.8 billion and counting. And most of these occupants of the planet Earth have one or two or more worms in their intestine, especially in low and middle income countries. So when these worms are passed out in the form of being carried out in stool, they tend to contaminate the environment. So human beings and animals, mainly human beings, are the number one clinically significant or epidemiologically significant reservoir of worms, and these worms are passed out in stool. So when we see that people have worm infestation, it will suggest that they would have partaken in food or water that has been contaminated by stool, or the contents of stool, in this case worms, especially the eggs of worms. So worms are in stools, they are in the intestine of human beings, and they are passed out in stool. This is of significant importance in low and middle income countries where unhygienic practices are the culture, where you have rampant open and indiscriminate defecation, where people do not have infrastructural support and facilities within their households or in public places to relieve themselves. So they end up relieving themselves in all kinds of places, in water bodies, in the bush, by the road, by the gutter. We know that that is one of the most important sources. So from these sources, food and water can be contaminated. We are well aware that a significant percentage of our population eats outside the house, outside their homes. So they eat unsupervised food that has been prepared in unsupervised environments, for example, with water that has been sourced from poorly water that has been sourced from sources that may have been contaminated by stool and that have been poorly prepared for human use. So all these are significant sources, and this would continue. Another important source is what we call auto-infection. So it's a patient has worm infestation and reinfects themselves, especially for one of the species, the pinworm, where it causes a lot of itching around the anal area. So you see people itching around their rectum or anal area, and then they bring it back to their mouth. For children, this is most significant because their hand-to-mouth activity is very high. Their tendency to maintain hygienic activity is also very low. So their chances and the risk of them being infected is much, much higher than the general population.
Okay, Dr. Agbo Ebuta, when you talk about worms, you use the word infected. Isn't it possible to have worms without being infected? I mean, must a child be dewormed? Even though it's nasty enough to think of such things.
Well, indeed, you can have a worm infestation with worm in the intestine of the affected person. And this worm may just be there and may be quiet. So if you have just one to a few hundred worms in the intestine, they may not cause any symptoms. They may just sit there. You have a mutual relationship with them. They are eating food, they are drinking water, and everybody is happy. But by the time they have enjoyed the environment so much and have now multiplied to several millions of worms in your intestine, the amount of food they are eating is going to continue to increase in significant quantity. The amount of blood they drink in the intestine is going to continue to increase. So they move from a mutual relationship to a parasitically dangerous relationship where the host now begins to lose a form of calorie, nutrients to this parasite which was just there, but now it has cousins, aunties, uncles, sisters, numbering millions. So they are now competing for nutrients with the host. That competition will impair the growth of, because that competition will result in a reduction in the amount of nutrients, even amino acids or minerals or all kinds of nutrients that are important for the growth and development. So when you talk of children are typical. One of the characteristics of children that differentiate them from adults is that they are still growing. Their mental capacity is being developed. In fact, before the age of 2, your full brain potential has not been completely developed. So you can imagine that a child who is still growing, still adding weight, whose brain potential is still being developed, is now being starved of nutrients and minerals because of a competing parasite in your intestine. So in such a situation, the impact will be significant on the health of the child. And in fact, in our environment, we know that in Africa, half of the children who die, half of them have malnutrition. And most of this malnutrition is not unconnected with parasitic infestation of the intestine. So definitely, the question is, even if it is not causing symptoms, it may one day cause symptoms, and it may also serve as a reservoir for infecting the community. Because let us not forget, some of these children who, even if they have a few parasites in their system, they go out to pass stool indiscriminately, water runs over them, fruits and vegetable water sources are contaminated, fruits and vegetables are contaminated, food that is prepared is probably not properly cooked, is contaminated, and then you reinfect a wider percentage of the society. So anywhere there is worm, it should be eliminated. So that is the advocacy. That is why we advocate, and that is why WHO supports that children and in fact everybody should be given the opportunity if indicated. So there are two approaches. We can use what you call the population-based approach and the person-based approach. So for the population-based approach, for example, if you have a population where you have probably conducted a study to estimate the number of people or children in that population who have parasitic infestation, and you find out that maybe out of 100 children, school-age children, you check their stool and you find out that more than 50 of them, 50% and above, have parasite infestation. In that population, the WHO recommends that for that population, at least they should receive anti-helmintic, that is deworming medication every 6 months. Now, if you find out that the population of people is less than 50% that have parasitic infestation, and maybe it's between 20 to 50%, then you can then...
Let me quickly butt in with a question, please.
Yes,
Let me quickly butt in.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've agreed that these unwanted guests should be eliminated. But I want you to complete the thought about the symptoms. You spoke about itching in the anal area. You spoke about malnutrition. Are there other ways by which someone may know that, you know, there's a worm infestation or infection in a person?
Yes, excellent question. Very, very illuminating. Answer to the question will be very illuminating. Thank you for that question. The first is that there are several different worms. You have hookworm, you have whipworm, you have roundworm. Some of them are more common than the others. But then indeed, a lot of them, the symptoms they would present with are common to all of them, while some symptoms are specific, some particular species of worm. So if a worm is in the stomach, is in the intestine rather, and is competing with nutrient, it will mean that it will cause malnutrition. So malnutrition may present as stunting. So you have children who have not achieved their growth potential. A child who should be 1 meter tall is now 0.6 meter. His child is short, and that is because of malnutrition. A child who should be 20 kg in weight is now presenting with 10 kg in weight. The child is wasted. So that is one of the manifestations of malnutrition. And then another thing which is dangerous is cognition. So you see that because of micronutrient deficiency, that is tiny metals that are important for normal development and brain development, these children may also have cognitive deficits. So that means their mental capacity, their ability to achieve a higher educational level and potential will be adjusted and recalibrated down. But to bring it home, some of the key symptoms are just normal symptoms like nausea. There's a tendency to feel like vomiting. Loss of appetite is also one of those symptoms. And because the worms are in the intestine and they are creating a lot of issues there, patients may also have abdominal discomfort. I mean, way back, even if my mom is not a medical doctor, she's an academic doctor, she used to say, if your tummy rumbling you, can you go and take worm medicine? Yes, that is not too far-fetched. It's possible we would have had worm infestations when we were growing up. But also, diarrhea can also be one of the symptoms. So you have children where you have watery diarrhea, and that is one of the symptoms. Some of these children may also have fever. They may have fever, and you'll be wondering maybe it's malaria. It's not malaria. Worm infestation can also cause fever. And then particularly for the whipworm, around the anus you would have itching, and at night they are itching their anus, in the morning they are itching their anus and all of that, because at night the worm, the tiny pinworms, they come out of the anus and stay around the anal area and cause irritation. That's what's causing the itching. So if you don't take care of those things, the hookworm, for example, has been known to cause severe anemia in some populations. In fact, there are studies that show that the whole population may be suffering with anemia, and it's just because of hookworm infestation. Now, all this, even if they affect the patient at a personal level, also affects the growth, the economic potential of a country. Imagine a whole country where you have at least 50% of their child population stunted. You know, sometimes we used to say that children of these days are growing very tall, and children of those days did not grow very tall. Maybe they had worm infestation, and we think that is one thing. But we also believe that these symptoms may not just be specific for worm infestation, but they are commonly seen. So to wrap it all up, nausea, feeling like vomiting, even vomiting, loss of appetite, abdominal pain, abdominal discomfort, diarrhea. And funny enough, if you have a parasitic infestation where the load is high, that load may form a ball, cause an obstruction in the intestine, and it can lead to a need for surgical intervention to relieve that obstruction. So the list is quite long, but these more or less will account for more than 80% of the clinical presentation.
Okay, we're going to go on a short break, but when we come back, Doctor, you're going to answer for me. Do we have that WHO program working in Nigeria? Welcome back. It's Health Matters on Channels Television, and we're talking about deworming. Dr. Agbo Ebuta is in the house. But at this point, you can interject with your calls. 0805-468-3514 is the number to call if you have any questions. You can get me on my email, moalale@channelstv.com, or Twitter at CTV_Mary A. While we continue with asking these questions. So, Dr. Ebuta, we are saying that this thing about the WHO program and all that, is it working in Nigeria? I remember a time that our parents used to give us these deworming medicines, but I don't see people giving their children these medicines. What's going on here?
The WHO is executing its mandate to a large extent as best as it can. One of its mandates is to provide guidelines, and those guidelines are easily available, and most well-trained health practitioners in Nigeria are able to access these guidelines online and to apply it in their practice. That's number one. Number two is that WHO also highlights country indices in terms of needs, health needs for countries, and this is also available. This is done by publications by WHO about the severity of health problems of interest. So this is also available. So WHO has executed two of those things very well. And where necessary, WHO also provides significant support through partnership with other organizations, sponsoring the presence of health practitioners, and in where necessary in hard-to-reach area or economically challenged sectors or areas, rather, also provide medication. So I'm fairly certain that WHO is discharging with its partners, the Federal Ministry of Health and other state Ministry of Health and local government health departments. But it's important to know that we cannot completely abdicate our responsibility to WHO, because we are the people who will be directly affected as a country if our children do not achieve their full physical growth potential, mental growth potential, and also health indices. So it's important that we seize that responsibility. I do not think that it's a very difficult thing for us to engineer or place the frameworks in place to ensure that there is a local production of medications. The medications for deworming are not they are not very far-fetched. They are not spectacular medications. They are cheap.
Let's take this call from Joseph in Calabar. Hello, Joseph. What's your question? Joseph doesn't seem to be on the line. But then let's talk about parents. Parents were giving these things before. My mom used to give us, and then we saw the worms. We actually saw the full worms coming out on the floor. We don't see them anymore, though. But the thing is, isn't it okay? It's like an OTC medication. Can parents take up this responsibility by themselves?
Actually, it makes a lot of economic sense for parents to take up this responsibility by themselves and to deworm their children every 6 months or every year, and where necessary, if they have the capacity to conduct the test. But it will interest you to know that to do a stool microscopy test may just be about between maybe 500 to 1,000 naira in a resource in typical cost setting. But to buy a medication to deworm a patient, it may just be between 200 to 400 naira. So if you look at the cost analysis at the end of the day at a per person basis, it may be cheaper for parents to just deworm their children every 6 months or once a year and achieve the full benefit, especially in a child who has some of those symptoms like probably not growing well, probably having poor appetite when you have rolled out malaria and the rest of the thing. The other advantage obviously is that these medications are over-the-counter medications They do not require prescriptions. Their adverse, that is their adverse reactions, that's the problems that may emerge from taking the drugs, are very, very low in the population. So it's a no-brainer. We would encourage parents to give their children. But more importantly, also apart from parents giving their children, we also encourage parents to take, because there are certain recommendations that have said that if your children have evidence of worm infestation, it is likely that you do also have. But the difference is that adults have achieved their full potential. They have grown fully, they have matured fully. So even if they have worms there, it may not impact their physical potential, growth potential.
So that's why adults don't really have
their
to take
quality of life, abdominal discomfort here, there, and all that. And some other symptoms,
doctor,
like even pneumonia or, yeah.
Let's see if we can get this call from Chinedu in Port Harcourt. Hello, Chinedu. What's your question? Okay, it looks like Chinedu is not coming through. You've already told us why adults may not take these medications. But in choosing medication for your child, should we go and look for one that can handle pinworms, whipworms, hookworms, tapeworms, roundworms? You have to look for all the worms in one medication. Is that how to do it?
Well, there are two approaches. There's a population approach and there's a patient-based approach. Now, if you have evidence in that there's a particular prevalence, there's a high prevalence of a particular species of worm in a particular population, then you can now take a decision and say, look, instead of going to test the whole population for what type of worms they have, you can combine a medication or a combination or a single medication, as the case may be, and do a population-based deworming exercise. However, when a patient comes to your clinic and the patient has certain symptoms and the patient may have seen a worm being passed out, and now we have digital phones, so we're able to snap and document a picture, and the person shows you the type of worm, then you may then adjust your anti-helminthic medication specific for that worm. Because while some of the worms can be addressed by some key anti-helminthics, like albendazole can address maybe 3 or so or 4 of the worms, but certain worms like tapeworm would require specific treatment for that particular species of worm. If not, you essentially will not have achieved anything. So definitely, yes, when you have, it's a population-guided decision. If you have evidence that in this population, in this part of the country, these are the type of worms that are prevalent in that population, then you know that this is a drug that would work for the whole population. So if you have an outreach or a health exercise and you want to deworm maybe 5,000, 10,000 people, you know the drugs to choose. But if a patient comes to your clinic and you have evidence from picture and all of that, you can take a specific decision.
Okay,
and
tell
take
us in
a
a
decision
few seconds,
and decide that this is the medication.
Tell us in a few seconds, do they deworm pregnant women and is it safe?
Well, typically you would not want to deworm pregnant women because some of the medications may not be safe for those pregnant women. So to follow the guidelines you get. But if you look at a situation, a per person basis, and you see that a patient, the benefit outweigh the risk, you can adjust your intervention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agbo Ebuta. It's been a very enlightening time with you. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of it. Thanks for coming to the show. And
it's a pleasure.
Everybody who tried to call in.
Happy.
And all those at home, have a wonderful day. I am Mary Alale Yusuf.